Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking. Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
Welcome to Becoming Bridge Builders, a faith-centered podcast for believers who sense God's calling to lead with wisdom, courage, and compassion in a deeply divided world. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Keith Haney, and as always, I want to begin by welcoming my guest. Today, my guest is Denny LaVe, a Catholic husband, father of 6, entrepreneur, adventurer, and former monk. He is a co-founder of Precision Precast Erectors and helping it grow into an Inc. 5000 recognized company before stepping away to mentor business leaders and discern broader service. Denny's life story includes scaling radio towers, motorcycle treks, and near-death experience, all shaped by faith, grit, healing, and a deep reliance on God. He is the author of Blue Collar Blessed, A Humble Life in Idaho, a testimony to how God forms character and calling in ordinary places. He's devoted to his wife Gina and their 6 sons. He practices his Catholic faith, coaches lacrosse, reads widely, enjoys golf, sailing, and a good grass-fed steak, which he invited me over for later. Denny, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Reverend. I appreciate being here.
It's good to have you on. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I'm thinking about steak the entire time, so it's all your fault.
It's all in the grill marks, right?
It's all in the grill marks. So I'm going to ask you my favorite question to kind of get us warmed up. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
You know, I think it's that God speaks in the silences. And so we have to, it was to make sure to create those silent spaces on a daily basis to allow him to pour himself in.
Yeah, that's so critical. And I love that because if you think about it, one of my favorite verses is be still and know that I am God. It's in that stillness and that quietness. Sometimes that God speaks. It reminds me of Elijah. You know, he's on the mountain and, you know, God's not in the wind. He's not an earthquake, but he's in the whisper. And so sometimes we're looking for the big moment, but it's like in those quiet moments, like you just mentioned, that we more clearly hear God.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, that's one of the things that I learned so clearly when I was living in the monastery, right? I mean, you spend a very significant part of your day in prayer, whether it's, you know, mental prayer, creating that quiet space to really listen, whether it's praying the Psalms throughout the day, you know, but you're constantly coming back in and creating that space to hear, to listen. And today's modern world is kind of the antithesis of that, right? Like we can't tolerate the quiet and we can't tolerate boredom, and it's detrimental to us, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's so many things that distract us from hearing. There's I remember watching some show where it's like there's beeps, there's noises, there's blinks, there's lights, there's everything. It's like there's just no place where it's just quiet. And I bet in Idaho there's a lot of places where it's just quiet, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's Idaho's it's a beautiful state. About 80% of the entire landmass of the state is federally or state owned.
Mm.
Which, to put that in perspective, if we were now, Idaho is very mountainous, but if we were to steamroll Idaho, it would actually be larger than Texas, right?
Wow.
So imagine 80% of Texas being federally or state owned and controlled, right? Like that's how much of Idaho's landmass is public lands. And so there's ample opportunities to get out and to be quiet and to just kind of decompress, which is very, very healthy, right? To get into the nature and just be at peace.
Wow, that's so cool. Let's talk about your experience. You went from monastery to the marketplace. What lessons did monastic life, silence, obedience, humility did you take with you as you carried on your life as a business person, a family member, and a leader?
It's the ability and the willingness to not just hear God, but to actually say yes, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's frightening and scary, but to say yes. My time in the monastery was after a period of saying, no, God, I don't want to go do that. I don't want to go do that. I don't want to go do that. And then I finally said, you know what? Okay, God, I will go do that after a lot of challenges and near death experiences. And then when I did it, I got there and the temptation to quit was very strong. It was very, very strong. And I actually took a private vow of I'm not going to quit. And God, if you want me here, I'm here. If you don't want me here, you'll have to tell me. And we got to the point where it was time to decide if I was taking vows and continuing or not. And we prayed about it. And I thought, man, I'm ready to take my vows. I'm ready to make this my life. And the superior in the monastery said, no, we think you should go home and have a family. and it's like, okay. And so then I went home and I found a beautiful woman and my wife Gina, and we have a beautiful family, and other opportunities have come along. When the opportunity to start our business it came along, it was like, oh, okay, I have to. It seems like this is God putting this in the road, and so I need to say yes. And then there's been a whole lot of other yeses along the way up into where I'm at now, where I'm actually in a campaign for the United States Senate, and that was also something that came up and required me to say yes. So,
wow, that's really interesting. Mine was just the opposite. I was at seminary, and I'm like, God, if you want me to stay, you gotta tell me something. And he did. He actually. I was about to pack up and go home, and all of a sudden, God gave me $10,000 full ride tuition payment, and I'm like, okay, I guess that was a sign. I need to stay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's if we look back over time in history of the Christian faith, like it's a religion that's deeply marked by its commitment to service of others. And just historically speaking, like the numbers of people willing to give themselves to God and to serve others without any compensation, without any hope of prosperity or good prospects, like it was a very substantial number of people. And to see that the numbers are down today, is it should be a flag for all of us that, okay, we all have room to step up and be more generous and set that example that God's faithful. If we give ourselves to him, good things will happen, and that can draw other people to give themselves to serve, and it creates that positive reinforcement loop.
So I'm curious. We talked about service, and when you said that, I was thinking about the fact you just mentioned to me about your Senate run. Tell me about how God led you to do that. Because if that was me, he'd have to have more than just a conversation to drag me in to want to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
But if God wants you to do it, he'll let you know when it's time. And so I just kind of put it away. And he said, grow my company, work under, raise your family. That's what I did. And at the end of 24, I was like, wow, I'm going to have a bunch of time in 25. I had a management team running my business. I'm like, God, what do you want next year? Do you want me to start another business? Do you want me to go play a bunch of golf? Like, what do you want? And I prayed very intensely for about 2.5 weeks. And it came to me in my prayer life that I want you to run for Senate. And I'm like, okay, hey, time out, God. If this is really, truly what you want, please, I need you to send a mentor to me that says this is what you want. And that person has to have, connections and some idea of which way to go. Because I'm not a politician, I'm not sure which way to go. And 3 days later, one of my mentors met me outside of church. On a Sunday service, I usually was going earlier in the day, but it was he met me out there. And he's like, "Hey, are you still thinking about this?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, now's the time to do it." And I know these people. I'll help you secure the North, and then we can work on the South. And let's think about it. And like, okay, God, like that's exactly what I told you I wanted, and you delivered. So yes, I will do exactly what you want me to do. It's funny how it's almost a pattern, right? The more we attune ourselves to listening to God and to doing what he asks us to do, I think it becomes easier to hear what he's saying. It's not always easy to do what he's asking us to do, right?
Sure.
But it does become something that you can hear, right? I mean, I think often of the parable of the talents, right? And the one who was given one and the one who was given two and the one who was given five, like there probably was more work involved and more risk involved in taking the 5 and turning it into 10 than there was in taking the 2 and turning it into 4. And it definitely wasn't a lot of work involved in taking the 1 and burying it in the ground.
Exactly.
Right. And so, as I look at my life and I think, man, God has just he's blessed me so much. He's given me so many things. He has kept me alive through various things that should have put an end to me and taken me home. He's made a tremendous investment and he expects a big return. And I have to be willing to do the work.
That's amazing. That really is. I also want to get into your book because I'm curious about that. The Blue Collar Blessed. Tell us about first of all, the name, why that name, and tell me what led you to write that book?
Well, so the name of the book, we sometimes when you're writing a book, you start with an idea and a title, and then you write the title. And other times you write the book. And then once you have the book done, you're like, what encapsulates this story?
Right.
And so that's how we got to our title. Was we didn't have a title going into it. We wrote the story, we wrote the book, and then as we were reflecting on what we had done, that was the title that seemed to fit the best, right? Like, I come from a blue collar family. My dad's been an iron worker for 50 years. Growing up, everybody was like, "You're so smart. You should be a doctor. You should be a lawyer. You should be something." And that was the path I was on. And I even recall, telling my dad, like, I never want to be an iron worker. I never want to be an iron worker. I'm never going to be an iron worker. And, they say, if you want to make God laugh, just, tell him your plans. Right.
Yeah. Tell him what you're not going to do. Right.
And so that's where, I became an iron worker before I went to college, right out of high school. And every time something would go wrong, I would end up going back into construction and doing quite well. And, to the point of where, okay, I was running jobs and then had this opportunity with my father to start a company doing it. And I realized over the years that, there's nothing wrong with having a blue collar job. There's nothing wrong. Like, I think when I was growing up, there was a little bit of a stigma around blue collar jobs. Like, that's what the dumb people go do. That's what the people who can't go to college go do. Right. And I think even today, a lot of people have a little bit of a lot of white collar people and clerical and management leadership people. They have a little bit of disdain for the blue collar folks. But what I've come to see is that blue collar folks are some of the greatest critical thinkers and problem solvers in the world. Right? Every day, they're applying their hands and their mind to reality and trying to solve and actually solving complex problems in a very real physical way. And if it doesn't work, and if their solution doesn't work, in a lot of cases, I mean, in my industry, it's very sad, but people get hurt or even die when we don't solve problems correctly. Right? And so, I have this blue collar life. I have made a very good living at it. And I feel very blessed, right? I mean, I've survived heat strokes. I've been on top of buildings that were about to collapse. I have shored up buildings that were in the process of collapsing. I've nearly fallen to my death several times and not fallen. Like, I've had a very blessed life. One of my write-ups actually says that, being going through life with guardian angels as a wingman is kind of a pattern for me.
I love that.
And so we wrote the book, and the reason for writing the book was I wanted the people in my state to have a way to get to know me, and not just on the surface level, right? Most candidates want to keep everything on the surface. They want to reveal just enough of themselves to get elected. And they usually have some sort of deep public profile. And so people have a sense that they know this person, and yet we're constantly seeing, politicians that we've known them for a long time at the surface level, and then we find out something deeper about them that makes us unhappy about them later on. And I thought, look, I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm like every other man and woman on the planet. I'm a sinner, but I'm trying my best to follow God. And let's detail the journey, because I think, in a sense, this is sad, but I think that parts of my story are very, very common to most Americans. Right? Most Americans have been or are familiar with broken families and the damage caused by broken families. And as adults, we tell ourselves that our kids are resilient and our kids can overcome the things that happen in a broken family situation. And to a degree, that's true. They can carry on, but those situations cause a lot more harm than we like to admit. And sometimes it takes a long time for that wound to be healed and for that pain to be dealt with, right? And I don't know how much you work in recovery circles, but they have a saying that I think is true, whether you're into recovery or not, that hurt people, and pain that's not transformed is passed on, right? And if I look around at our country today, and I think, okay, there's a lot of hurt people. There's a lot of hurt people that are trying to deal with their pain. There's a lot of pain that hasn't been transmuted, and it's being transmitted. And that's, culturally, we have to say, hey, that's not okay. And I'm going to be the source of change. Like, each one of us has to take our own stand and say, I'm going to heal. I'm going to work on transmuting that pain into something better and making my family life better so that the next generation can be better. And so in the book, that's what we tried to convey, was the path that I took to go from, okay, you've got some very deep wounds. You've got some very, very deep things that happened. How did you process that, and how did you heal that? And what's been the result and the fruit of that? And people have found that to be very inspiring.
Well, I imagine that's really good. I want to dig into something else we talked about a little bit from your story. And that is, as a believer, you've also accomplished quite a bit. And for so many people who are in the Christian sphere, ambition and faith almost seem to contradict each other. So how do you pursue excellence and growth in business without letting that success become what defines you?
That's a great question. I think it has to be that, I think the best way to answer that is actually with a concept that I learned from Dr. Bob Schutz. He talks about identity, like the who we are question. And as Christians, like this should be so simple and straightforward for us because Christ spelled it out for us. And Paul details it extensively. And yet, because of our human condition, we lose sight of this, right? And so what Dr. Schutz describes is that most of us, we get caught up in some mission, some sort of role that we play, right? And then we take our identity from that role, and then we get all of our relationships from there. And because we're on earth and things change, that mission does not last forever. That mission often changes. Well, if your identity is completely tied up with your mission and the mission changes, you very easily lose a sense of who you are and you lose your relationships, right? But the way that God intended for it to be is for us to have a relationship with him. And so we have this relationship with God, and he says, you are my beloved child. You are my son. You are my daughter, and I love you. And then he gives us a mission. And when the mission changes, it doesn't change our identity because our identity is based on that divine sonship, that divine daughterhood, right? And so the mission can go from I'm a student, I'm a businessman, I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a politician. It can go to any of those things depending on what God wants at any point in time, but your identity should be rock solid. And so when I see business and success and pursuing things, like that's just part of what God is asking me to do. It's not who I am. And so if I'm very successful, it's because God's blessed me. If I fail, it's because there's a very real chance that success, more success could have undermined me and could have actually taken me away from God, right? I think the other thing that's helped tremendously in the success that we've had in keeping it balanced, I remember early on in our company, we had our first profitable, really reasonably profitable year. And oftentimes, especially in the construction world, you can have a profitable year but not have any cash because the cash is all tied up in the system. And we got to the end of the year, and I was talking to my wife, Gina, about donations for the year, because we early on, even when we were dirt broke, newlyweds, we had made a commitment to each other that, look, we're going to give 10% of what we make. That's what we're going to do. We're at least 10% we're going to give. And so now we had this year where we had made a substantial amount of money on paper and didn't have a lot of cash. And I looked at, sat down with her and I'm like, honey, this is what it looks like we made for the year. This is how much cash we actually received. What do you think? Do we tithe based on the cash that we actually are receiving? Do we tithe based on how much we actually made on paper? And she's like, and then I was talking to her about gross versus net. And she's like, well, I don't know, honey. Like, do you want to be blessed on the gross receipts or on the net receipts? And I'm like, you're right, dear. You're right. I know which way we're going. And it's not always easy to say that, you know what, I haven't received the cash yet, but I'm going to tithe on that anyways. Right. But the impact it's allowed us to have, you know, I mean, I'm not a fabulously rich person, but, you know, to have donated since we started the company, well, yeah, easily since we started the company, you know, to have donated over $1 million to different charities and orphanages and things like that as a modest businessman, like, to me, that's impressive. And I'm more proud of that than I am of the business success. And again, that's God blessed us and us trying to be good stewards of that and give that back, you know, out into the community rather than hoard it for ourselves.
I love that story. So, like me, you have 6 kids, except you have all boys. But you're raising 6 boys in a culture full of confusion and noise. What are some of the things that in your home you use to ground your family during these very confusing times?
So in order to keep our kids grounded in, you know, one of the things that we're very careful about is what do we let into the home and what do we let into our kids' life? You know, when smartphones were starting to be a thing and tablets were starting to be a thing, we actually made a very conscious decision to not put smartphones and tablets in our kids' hands. And we also, as a family, we made a decision to say, look, we're going to very carefully curate, you know, the shows and the media, the TV, you know, movies that we watch. And we're going to spend a lot more time playing games and going outdoors and having quality family time as opposed to, you know, spending a lot of couch time together. Now, and I have to give credit where credit's due because my wife has played a huge role in that. You know, she grew up in the mountains of Idaho, and getting outdoors was a really big deal for them. And she's made sure that our boys and us, that we've spent a lot of time outdoors. And, you know, but we've been on the same page when it comes to media, right? Because today's modern media, it's not designed to help us raise virtuous kids. It's not designed to help us raise, you know, adults who are pursuing God. It's designed to sell things. And, you know, if I were a little cynical, I would say it was designed to drag them down and to make them more worldly, and perhaps even and corrupt and steal their virtue. Not all. There are some good things out there, you know, but I like to look at the example of True Grit. You know, when we look at the True Grit from, I don't know, was it the 60s or 70s with Don Wayne, and then the remake they made a few years back. The one they made back in the 60s was rated G for general audiences, right? And the one that they remade was, I think, PG-13 or possibly R. Right?
Wow.
But the difference is that, you know, the one that they rated higher, more adult, more, you know, for more mature audiences, was because it had the violence and it had smoking. And that's what they were concerned about, right? Whereas if you look back at the older one for general audiences, like the opening scene is 3 criminals that were hung from a tree. And there's kind of the same amount of violence, and there's a little bit of cussing, but it was like, okay, those are fit for general audience because it's showing a portrayal of justice and a pursuit of a criminal. And the violence isn't glorified. It's just part of the story. Whereas, you know, the modern media is saying, oh, well, somebody was smoking. That's terrible. Like that has to be marked for a mature audience because, oh my gosh, they're smoking. And granted, like, I don't think smoking is great. And I don't think that, you know, but if that's the worst thing a person does in their life is smoke, man, what a great world that would be.
Right.
You know, but the reality is that even when our politicians are cussing like sailors in public, right? Like, that to me is a much bigger problem than people smoking. Right now, granted, I enjoy public spaces that are smoke free now. Like I really truly enjoy that. But I'd much rather have a public space that was profanity free. Like, so anyways, your question was around the media. How do we raise our boys and keep them away from the confusion today? I think a part of that was to really take charge of their formation and say, look, this is our responsibility as their parents to make sure that they understand that who is God, right? And what's their role. And so we haven't had a lot of that. We really haven't had any of those issues around, gender identity. We haven't had to deal with a lot of that stuff because a lot of it was just very clear from early on. And then we weren't exposing them to the media that was pushing an agenda.
That's good. So this podcast kind of exists to help believers lead with courage, compassion, in divided times. What does bridge building look like in practical terms for men and women who work, lead, and raise families in today's culture?
If I can go back to that example of the identity and relationship, no matter where you're at and no matter what you're doing, like, your relationship with God has to be there. It doesn't have to be the relationship of a monk or a priest or a reverend, or like where you have a commitment to a higher level of prayer and to a higher amount of commitment of time to serving God directly. But we're all required to love God with our whole heart, our whole soul, our whole mind, our whole body, right? And then the next part I would say is as Christ said, look, the second commandment is similar to the first, right? You have to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And I think, for me, a big part of my journey was coming to know and understand, like, what does it actually mean to love yourself, to truly love yourself? Because I think we forget that. Like, the world often pushes us, even people who are not believers will often throw in our face, well, you're supposed to love your neighbor. You're supposed to love your neighbor. Okay, well, that's only a part of what it is. It's because you have to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Well, what does it mean to love yourself? Right? It means to love yourself as Christ would love you. It means that you need to actually treat yourself the way he would treat you if he was standing right there. You need to talk to yourself even in between your ears. You need to talk to yourself the way that he would talk to you. And so often we've lost the ability to love ourselves. Well, if you can't love yourself, how are you able to love your neighbor like yourself? And then leadership is just an outpouring of that love of your neighbor, right? Because real leadership should be leading people higher, whether it's on a purely natural plane at work. There's still room to grow in virtue and to demonstrate, that godly love without necessarily overtly being religious in the workplace. Right? You can still demonstrate that love without having to bring, overtly your faith into it. And that's where I see that bridge being built is, you love God and then you love your neighbor as you love yourself. And if you do that in your daily actions, that changes the world.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm going to ask you this question. What scripture anchors your daily life? If there's one scripture verse that you say, this kind of defines kind of my goal for each day.
Oof. To me, it often varies, right? As a Catholic, we're very, very much rooted in the cycle, right? In the liturgical cycle. And so, right now we're very much focused on the resurrection and on Christ's renewal of all things and opening up heaven. Yeah, I don't know that there is a single particular verse that has been the anchor.
No, I get this. It's a good answer. Mine keeps changing. So,
what I guess if there's one that I come back to often, it's I think it's from Romans chapter 7, And it's where Paul is kind of pondering the mystery of the human condition. And he's talking about how, he's with God, but somehow does things he doesn't want to do.
Yeah, the good I would do that I don't do.
And the things that he doesn't, that he wants to do, he's not able to.
Right.
And I think for anybody who is, it's very often for people to forget how human we are, right? And to want to not look at it. Like I know for a long time, I didn't want to look at one of my favorite authors. He calls it, the misery of the human condition, right? That we don't want to look at it because it's painful and it hurts and it's ugly. And I think most of us, when we see the wounds and we see those weaknesses, we hate that part of ourselves. We abhor it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to look at it because it's not who we imagine ourselves to be. And this author, he talks about that as that's the place where Christ meets us. That's that wound where he wants to heal us and pour his grace into us. That's where he wants to see us and meet us. And, it's not easy to turn our gaze there.
Yeah.
But how many of the stories and miracles in the Bible are him finding someone who has that misery and meeting them where they're at, and yeah, I spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, I like that. So I'm going to ask you my other favorite question. What do you want your legacy to be?
I want my sons to be better men than I am. That's what I want.
That's good. Where can people find you? I know your website is newlionofidaho.com. Is that the best place to connect with you and follow you on social media?
They can connect with me there, and then for the Senate campaign, it's dennyforsenate.com. So.
And how's that campaign going? I'm just curious. This is the early part of the run here. How's that going?
It's going reasonably well. The primary is in about a month, and I've gotten support from some very surprising quarters, and some of the folks that I thought for sure would be at my back and supportive have been like, we actually prefer sending an 83-year-old man back to the Senate for 6 years.
And who is your current senator?
His name is Jim Risch.
Oh, okay.
And he's a nice man. He's just, I thought that perhaps that he's turning 83 in, I think, 2 weeks. And I thought we'd learned our lesson there, over the past 10, 12 years, that we'd seen how that goes when we send people back to office for 4 to 6 years in their 80s, that maybe that's not the best thing. But, we'll see what the voters decide.
It must be the I states, because our senator is also in his 80s. So there you
go. Oh, to his credit, I think your senator actually has a track record of actually getting stuff done, whereas mine has a record of keeping a seat warm. So
there you go. So I'm going to ask you. In this season, we have a new thing. It's a surprise question. Pick a number between 1 and 10 for your surprise question.
7.3.
All right. Would you rather have unlimited sushi for life or unlimited tacos for life?
Definitely tacos.
You're not a sushi guy?
Oh, I love sushi, but I'm thinking, man, unlimited sushi could, all it takes is 1 or 2 bad bits of sushi and you'd never want to see it again if that's all you had for the rest of your life.
That's true.
That could go sideways in a hurry.
It definitely could. Well, Denny, thanks so much for being an incredible guest on the show. Friends? Go ahead.
Can I ask you a question?
Well, go right ahead.
If you could wave, boom, magic wand, and fix one thing in the country, what would you fix?
That's an interesting question. Idealistically, if it was just idea, I would love for us to get back to the fact where we could work together. There to me, there's too much division, and I don't mean it in a Pollyanna way, but I think both sides have good ideas, and I think sometimes the better ideas meet in the middle when there's compromise and you listen to the other side of the story, which has kind of always been my goal on my podcast. It's like I don't have all the answers, and to think that I do have all the answers, I'm not asking the right question, because there's so much that's nuanced in many of our discussions, and to just take a side and not realize that there's a much deeper, sometimes systemic problem or a cultural problem or societal problem that is not getting addressed, we miss out on true solutions to so many things because we don't communicate with each other. So I would just love to get us back to the point where what's most important is the betterment of the country, not the betterment of my party.
100%. You know, it's funny. I did a book tour earlier this year, and I went to every county in my state talking to elected officials and their staff, and that was the number one thing that came up that they wanted to see fixed, was that they wanted to see Congress working together again to solve problems.
Yeah.
You know, they're tired of the toxic rhetoric and the fighting, and they want to see their officials get stuff done.
That's it. Let's just get stuff done.
Yeah, 100%. So, well,
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, thanks again, Denny. So friends, Blue Collar Blessed is a reminder that God shapes leaders not only in pulpits and classrooms, but on job sites and homes and throughout quiet obedience over time. If you're longing for faith that's grounded, resilient, and deeply practical, I encourage you to pick up Denny's book and reflect on how God may be forming your calling right where you are. You'll find links to Blue Collar Blessed and to Denny's work, and also his campaign site in the notes you'll see below. If this episode encouraged you, challenged you, brought clarity, please subscribe, share it with someone you care about, and leave a review. That's how we continue building bridges together. Thank you so much. Until next time, keep building bridges and keep being courageous. Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to NoahBot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at @bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter @RevHeadpin. Thanks again and tune in next time.
Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to NoahBot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at @bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter @RevHeadpin. Thanks again, and tune in next time.